this series, this ongoing weekly satsang on the Song of Spirit, which is also known as the Bhagavad Gita. And every week we'll dive into India's beloved scripture. We'll watch a short video of Swamiji, of Swami Kriyananda. And I'm just going to share a little bit of background as an introduction on the Gita. And then we'll share a little bit, we'll have time for questions and answers and a longer meditation at the end. So it's an inspirational evening that is open to everyone, and we're just very happy to share it with you. I used to serve at Crystal Clarity. Crystal Clarity is the publisher for Ananda. So Autobiography of a Yogi, the original 1946 Blue edition that you see. Also, Swamiji was a prolific and creative author himself of over 150 books, 400 pieces of music. So I had the great joy to be at Crystal Clarity actually when Swamiji wrote this book, which is the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, Yogananda wrote the original Gita commentaries when he was here, actually on 29 Palms out in the high desert. And he had this deep inspiration, and he wrote it from a state of superconscious, intuitive insight. And that was in 1948 or thereabouts. And Self-Realization Fellowship actually did not come out with their 2 volumes. God Talks with Arjuna, you may have seen that or come across it in your spiritual studies, actually until 45 years later. So they were very long in their editing. And Swamiji was with Master, he was with Yogananda when he wrote those original Gita commentaries. And when God Talks with Arjuna came out, although it's a massive and incredible spiritual work in itself, it's heavily edited, and he felt it lacked some of the original simplicity and that intuitive clarity, inspirational flow. Remember, that's what the Bhagavad Gita means. It's a song of spirit. And Swamiji had this, he was in India at the time, around 2006, and he had this dream, superconscious dream of Yogananda. He could never have access to the original writings that Yogananda did on the Gita. And so he always knew that in some way that he had to write about the Gita and sort of reignite that inspiration that Yogananda shared with him. And so he had this dream where Yogananda came to him and said, well, don't forget the possibility of a skylight. Just like we have these skylights here in the temple that bring down this light. And then he woke up from that dream and he began writing. And Swamiji said it was as if, Yogananda said to him once, edit like lightning, but don't change a word. Can you imagine that kind of, someone said, Flo, edit our tennis manual, but don't change a word. It was sort of this paradoxical advice, but what Swamiji realized over time in attunement to his guru was that he meant don't change a thought, don't change the essence, don't change the essential vibration. And Swamiji fell into this state of channeling his guru's essence and inspiration of the Gita. And he wrote this essence of the Bhagavad Gita, explained by Paramahansa Yogananda as remembered by his disciple Swami Kriyananda. And in 6 weeks, the Gita is one of the deepest scriptures in the world. And in 6 weeks, he wrote this 600-page commentary that is an absolute gem. It's unlike any spiritual book I've ever read. So this is going to be our scripture that we'll dive into on a weekly basis. So I just wanted to share a little bit of that background. And we don't have copies tonight. We will have copies probably by next week that you can purchase. So if you want to read this for your own inspiration at home. So with that said, why don't we watch the video of Swamiji?
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om, I bow to the Lord Vasudeva. The Bhagavad Gita is probably the deepest scripture in the world. It doesn't mean that other scriptures are not deep, but they touch that depth at points here and there. They intersperse them with many stories that are beautiful in themselves for daily life, but for the central reality of man, where we are today and what we need to do to become what we want to be, which is to say happy, peaceful, and so on. This Bhagavad Gita is an extraordinary scripture. It is based on an allegory. It is actually a selection from the Mahabharata, which is one of the great epics of India. And it's all allegorical. The characters, even though they existed in history, at least the main ones did, the underlying part of it is the psychological struggle between the lower, the downward moving aspects of the soul and the upward aspiration of the soul. The downward moving aspects of ego, I should have said. The Bhagavad Gita describes this battle, and we must understand from the very beginning that the spiritual path is not an easy path. Somebody said to me recently, all I want is peace. She doesn't understand that we must win that peace by conquest. It is not something we get by not fighting. Non-violence means much more than simply refusing to fight. Mahatma Gandhi was asked this question once, what would you do if somebody came to your village and began shooting everybody? He said, I'd let him shoot me first. That's not enough. If he shoots you and then goes on and shoots everyone else, there come times when evil must be combated. It must be combated on many levels. We have penitentiaries for people who need to be confined, otherwise they would be a danger to society. We have this also in our own nature. We have qualities which we can't just relax away from and wish well. Qualities of anger, jealousy, passion, greed, all the usual qualities that pull us downward from our higher aspiration. The Bhagavad Gita is set on this battlefield. Kurukshetra is an actual place, and it actually was a battle in history. But Vedavyasa, who wrote the Gita, wrote it in order to help people to understand that behind the outward things are always these inner realities that we must fight. And we must fight them on all levels. We must resist evil. There's an interesting story, because you think of saints as being very sort of kindly all the time and warm and tender. They're not always that way. It takes a great deal of strength to find God. There's a wonderful story about Teresa Neumann, who was a real saint in Bavaria in the last century. And when she was a young maiden and young swains would come around courting her, she'd take after them with a pitchfork. She just wanted, I think Yogananda said that she had been Mary Magdalene in one of her last lives. And I suppose she just had it with men. But the point is that we must have that kind of determination which will win to victory. You can't coast your way to victory. And the war of Kurukshetra is also the battlefield of Kurukshetra is also called Dharmakshetra. Dharma means right action. And it's the field of right action where the upward moving tendencies in man combat the lower moving tendencies in man. We are, as it were, a whole nation Each one of our qualities is like a different citizen. It's a fascinating thing to consider how, as in any country, there are those who want peace and those who don't want peace, those who want trouble. In any country, we must side with those who are on the side of righteousness, and we must somehow fight against those qualities in ourselves that lead us downhill. It's not an easy battle. It's the toughest battle in the world. It's the only battle that has any final results. Every other battle, in the end, gives you no satisfaction. You fight your way to become successful. Finally, you achieve that success, like one man Yogananda met, who he had worked. He said, "I can't believe it took me 40 years to make my first $1 million." And Master said, "And you aren't happy yet?" "No, I won't be happy until I get 40 million. Well, before he could make his 40 million and relax and be happy, he died of extreme nervous prostration. You might as well understand that the real battle is how to become peaceful right now. The outward battle for gain, for fame, these things end up with ruined nerves and no satisfaction. Howard Hughes, who was the most wealthy man in the whole world, said 1 week before he died, he was asked by a newspaper reporter on the phone, "Are you happy?" And Howard Hughes said, "No, I can't say that I'm happy." Well, all that money won't make you happy. All that pleasure won't make you happy. All that power won't make you happy. All that fame won't make you happy. Nothing will make you happy, except if you can find that happiness within your own self. There are two things that every human being in the universe, in the world, wants. They want to avoid pain, and they want to find happiness. And the worst mafioso, really, that's all he wants. He just doesn't know what will give it to him. He thinks power or money or revenge or different negative attitudes will attain it for him, but they won't. You must change yourself. You must find that peace within. And when you have found that, then you discover a reason for loving everybody in the world. Because everybody is looking for that happiness. That happiness is finally God. As Swami Shankara in India said many hundreds of years ago, that the definition of God is Satchidananda, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. And this is our nature. We came from Him, we were made by Him, and we were dreamed out of His consciousness. Our goal in life is to reunite ourselves with that bliss. And first we think that we'll find it in the world outside. The real struggle is understanding where it lies, how we can find it, how we can rise above our limitations and achieve oneness with God. God bless you.
This is from the introduction, similar to this video.
Truth is one. People try to slice it like a pie, but even the slices of a pie narrow to a single center. What the Gita shows is that however many aspects there are of truth, all of them radiate outward from a single center. Yogananda emphasized in his writings, and especially in his commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, that man is a triune being, physical, mental, and spiritual. All parts of human nature need to be developed, lest any one of them obstruct the others. My guru once mentioned to me, with regard to one-sided approaches to the Bhagavad Gita, of which there are many, even Swami Shankara, profound though his commentary was, denied the importance of physical reality. What he wrote was overbalanced on the spiritual side. He was right in saying that all things are only an appearance, but it should be added that in this realm of appearances, Maya does have its own reality. Everything is a dream, but even dreams, as dreams, are real. The Bhagavad Gita teaches every important aspect of the spiritual path. During activity, karma yoga, the yoga of right action. During thinking and discrimination, jnana yoga, the yoga of wisdom and discrimination. When feeling and experiencing emotion, bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion. There is a central teaching, however, in the Bhagavad Gita which unites all paths, even as subsidiary streams unite in a larger river. That river, Yogananda said, is the energy flowing in the spine. The subsidiary paths of yoga offer guidance to people of different basic temperaments: the active, the discriminating, the heartful. The central river to enlightenment, however, is shown by Raja Yoga, the royal yoga, the pathway of the spine. Raja Yoga, he continued, takes one straight up the central pathway of the spine into the inner silence of divine communion. It is the teaching of this yoga, finally, that makes the Bhagavad Gita truly a scripture for all mankind. It is why Krishna stated in the Gita, "O Arjuna, be thou a yogi."
So here we have this introduction to the Gita, that there is one, as the scriptures tell us, as great masters tell us, that there's one reality, that God is an infinite, absolute consciousness, and that consciousness has now taken form. As they say that why did God create this world? To enjoy himself through many. And that it's the same spirit that's manifesting through all of us. And yet we still have to traverse where we've been given the free will to make a choice on this battlefield. So in the Gita, which we'll get into more of the setup, as Swamiji was sharing it being an excerpt of the Mahabharata, Arjuna, who represents us as the devotee, is taken by Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Remember, there are some historical truths to it, but it's mainly an underlying spiritual allegory between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. And it's interesting that before the battle begins, Krishna, who represents the Guru and represents this point between the eyebrows, or the light spirit, or the spoken voice, so to speak, of silent God, he takes Arjuna to the middle of the battlefield. And this is where Arjuna sees both sides. He sees the Kauravas, the forces of darkness, and he sees the Pandavas, the forces of light, on which he's fighting. And it's and this is when Arjuna has his moment of despair, because he sees on the forces of darkness, he sees cousins and friends. Now this is representative of our immaterial tendencies, that when we take up the spiritual path, we think, oh my God, I can't do it. How can I let go of all of these seeming sense pleasures and attachments and all the fancy, frozen boundaries we have: family, race, gender, our culture, everything. It's incredibly frightening to the ego. Remember, so the ego is really the downward pulling current, where our soul nature is that aspect of ourself that is perfectly free. But it doesn't come without a battle. And that battle isn't that we need to take outward action necessarily in fighting, but the battle is on every level. That's what Dharma Devi was sharing in the introduction, we are a triune being, physical, mental, and spiritual. And so the Gita applies to all of those levels. So every time we sit to meditate, it's in essence a battle to awaken our spiritual qualities and to fight distraction and whatnot. And when we're in the world, the battle of right living, of abiding by and actually living the teachings and not just taking them into our meditation room, to our thinking, our discrimination, our feeling nature. So the Gita applies on every level. And that's why it has such boundless inspiration for us. Because if we ever have questions, which we all come up with questions on the path, or we ever go through discouragement or challenges, Krishna has advice. And you'll find there is every experience you've gone through or you will go through, the Gita has a response for it. Now, it's of course helpful to study the scripture as this, but it's more important to remember it's the song of spirit. That's why it's this. The whole spiritual path, in essence, comes down to attunement and receptivity. And it's through that subtle attunement with Krishna, so to speak, with the light spirit, with the Guru, that we can draw and have that magnetic interchange with the divine. There is a part of Krishna a part of the Gita where Arjuna asks Krishna, which path is easier, the impersonal path going straight to God, or the path where I see God in form and call out to God in a devotional aspect? And Krishna says that path of pure jnana yoga, with just going, purely from a discriminative aspect and excluding a devotional
Abstract.
an abstract God versus relating to God on a level that, such as, a form like Krishna, like the Guru, like whatever form is dear to you. It's much harder to go the abstract route. And so that the Guru actually responds in this way to the call of our heart. And so that's why the Gita for us is incredibly important, because we relate to other people. We have friends, we have family, we know what it's like to have someone that we care for. But in the Gita, Krishna plays this role. One of the roles he plays is our divine friend, that completely understands the trials and the tribulations and the despair and the discouragement and everything that we're going through. And at the same time, he gives us not ego balm, he gives us the real spiritual prescription, which is when Arjuna is having that despair, he wakes him up. He says, you are a warrior. You must fight. And it awakens that latent spiritual, the spiritual warrior that is within all of us. And he's reminding us that we have that God-given free will to act. And that's why Swamiji was also sharing that it's also known as Dharma Kshetra, or the field of right action. And he is helping us, reminding us that it's through using our will, our feeling, our intelligence in attunement with the divine that freedom then comes to us. So those are just a few introductory thoughts. Is there anything, Dharma Devi, you wanted to share before we have questions?
Do you want to share about the characters?
I don't think we have, maybe not too much tonight.
Well, let's at least introduce the Pandava brothers, in case anybody's not familiar with them. represent our heroes in the Mahabharata, which the Gita is a little sliver of. And they also, Yogananda said, represent the chakras. So this is a way that you can relate to them within yourself. We all have the Pandava brothers within us, which is kind of fun. So remind me, I always get the twins mixed up. Sahadeva is represented by the base chakra, the root chakra. Nakula at the sacral center. They're twins, and they're actually born of a different mother. The story is kind of interesting. I think we should get into it because it's sort of like the foundation.
Yeah.
So,
just don't have time for questions and meditating, that's all.
Yeah, we will. So, the Pandava brothers are sort of born of Pandu. And the reason I say sort of is that when Pandu is married to his wife, Kunti, and his second wife, that was pretty common then to have multiple wives. And actually, we'll find that a little later, there's a wife who has 5 husbands. So it goes both ways. So the other wife, Madri. So Sahadeva and Nakula are born of Madri, and you could say Pandu, except Pandu was cursed that he could not be intimate with his wives. So he was all set to be the next king of Hastinapur. And he went away to the forest, like to get away from the city kind of thing. And while he was out just relaxing and having a good time, he came across what looked to be a deer. Now remember, all of this is allegorical, so we can get into it with the questions and stuff, but he comes across a deer, a couple of deer that are mating. And he doesn't see that they're mating, he sees a deer, and he shoots the deer because he's hunting the deer. He shoots the deer, finds out it's actually a rishi who transformed himself into a deer, and his wife had also transformed into a deer. So he shot this poor rishi and his wife. The arrow went through both of them. They both died. But before they both died, the rishi said, "I'm cursing you because you shot me while I was being intimate with my wife. You can't be intimate with your wives." So, oh my God, Pandu is freaking out. He can't go back to the kingdom because he can't bear sons. He can't rule the kingdom. That's, his mental process. So he's going to just take off to the forest and become a hermit, and story done. But his wives are completely loyal to him. They say, "We will not let you go to the forest alone. We're going with you." So he says, "What can I do?" So they go with him, and but Pandu has this deep longing to have a son, and he's trying to accept his fate, but he can't help it. He's just this strong desire to have a son. And so his first wife, Kunti, remembers this boon that she was given as a young woman, that she could call on one of the devas, one of the gods, and request a son at will. So she sees her husband in despair and says, "Hey, I've got a boon. We can actually have a son and you don't have to do anything." And so he's just thrilled. "It's great, do it right away. Call on The Lord Dharma. And
Sun. Oh, darn.
No.
Sorry.
we're not getting into that yet. Call on Dharma. And so she calls Dharma, and the son comes, Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira is the oldest of the Pandava brothers, who represents the throat chakra. Calmness. He's their leader. He's infinitely wise, completely knows Dharma, or right action. So then Pandu's like, this is great. Well, call on Vayu. Call on Vayu, the wind god. And so she does, and she's kind of like, okay, Pandu, fine, I call on the wind god. And so then is born Bhima. Bhima represents the heart center, and he's the strongest of the Pandavas, but also just the strongest man alive. He just has incredible strength. When he's born, Kunti accidentally drops him on a stone, and he breaks the stone. So,
These are also related to the elements, because Dharma is Yudhishthira, calmness. It's also ether. Vayu is the wind god, which is air, your heart, your lungs. So it's talking about the strength and the power, the courage of the heart.
right, so Pandu is just elated, giddy, and he can't help it. He says, okay, call on, who is our
Fire god.
Who is it?
Fire god.
Agni, thank you.
Agni.
Call on Agni, the fire god. So she's just like, geez. Okay, fine. So she does. And so is born Arjuna, the lumbar center, the solar plexus, who also is represented by fiery self-control. Arjuna is the main character, the main Pandava in the Bhagavad Gita, because he's the greatest warrior. Very interesting. So we'll get into that more deeply.
And Arjuna is that, the center where we shift from the lower, the two, Sahadeva and Nakula, the younger brothers, are earth and water. And then you shift to fire, air, ether. So these are the transcendent sons of Kunti.
Wait. Not done yet. So Pandu says, okay, let's do it again. And she's like, I'm done. You've asked me 3 times. And there's something with the number 3. Like, if you can ask a favor 3 times, and once you get to the 3rd, it's like, okay, all bets are off. So she says, I'm done. But I'll share this sacred mantra with Madri, your second wife, so she can bear you a son as well. So she does, and he says to Madri, call on the Ashwini twins. I don't know anything about the Ashwini twins, but she does, so she has twins. And the twins are Sahadeva and Nakula, who are the sacral and the base chakra. And so, like Narayan said, they're unique because Madri is also kind of the more reckless of the 2 wives. She's kind of the free spirit that's just like, let's just go ride on the horse, Pandu, why think about the kingdom? Why think about all your responsibilities? Let's just go have fun. Yeah, and she's younger and she's less experienced. Kunti is the wise, deep, centered one. So it's interesting how, it's broken up this way, but it all has a very spiritual meaning. Anything else about that?
I think that's a good introduction. It's all allegorical, and you can kind of get your head spinning around with it. But the allegory is that the Pandavas, these 5, which represent the 5 chakras in the base of the spine, which is at the coccyx, the sacral center adjacent to sexual organs, the lumbar center, so earth, water, fire, Sahadeva, Nakula, Arjuna, fire, Bhima, air at the heart, and Yudhishthira for calmness or ether at the throat. These are the 5 Pandava brothers. And then Krishna represents the spiritual eye at the point between the eyebrows. So anyway, we'll get more into depth, on the Pandavas and who they're battling. This is just a way of introduction.
And it is very true that in the Battle of Kurukshetra, in this story, the forces of light are very small compared to the forces of darkness. But the forces of light are also very vast. So there are many characters that represent our different higher qualities that are really beautiful and fun characters too. So we'll get to touch on some of those along the way as well. Because what's really beautiful I've found about the Gita is that it gives us more tools. It is also a really fun story. The Mahabharata is just a really fun, exciting fantasy adventure story. But it gives us a tool, like Narayan was saying, everything you can imagine on the spiritual path. You can go to the Gita and there's the answer is there. And it's amazing. It's really fun to get to be sharing it.